Oh, woe is me. Oh, woe is me. Who will set old Santa free? Who will give me a helping hand and get my sleigh out of the sand?
Hey everyone, it's Jonathan, and welcome to Christmas in July on iHeart Movies. Finally! Today, Nicki from Trivial Theater and I are going to be talking about a movie that she's been telling me about for probably at least a year, Santa Claus and the Ice Cream Bunny. Yes, that is the title, and yes, this movie is as weird as it sounds. What a way to celebrate Christmas in July. I had grand plans for this month. I was going to do at least 5 episodes, one every week. And then I got a full-time job, which completely derailed my plans and almost made me miss Christmas in July altogether. Oh well, if my plans were going to be derailed, I'm glad it was for such a good reason. At least for me, anyway. I suppose if you were looking forward to a Christmas in July spectacular, this might end up being a bit of a disappointment. But it's not all bad news. There will be 2 episodes, and they are good ones because this is a 2-part review. Santa Claus and the Ice Cream Bunny, in a way, is almost 3 entirely separate movies, and we're going to talk about them all. When Nicki and I recorded these episodes, we talked for almost 3 hours, so there's a lot to discuss. There are 2 different versions of the film, each involving a different fairy tale sandwiched between a bunch of random Santa nonsense. So this first episode will be talking about the first half of the main movie and the first version of the movie, which involves the story of Thumbelina. And next time will be the second version, which involves Jack and the Beanstalk. But there is so much more to this than fairy tales. There's a gorilla, child endangerment, telepathy, a feral raccoon, and so much more. There really is nothing else like this movie, and there probably never will be again.
Who will help me? Who will set me free?
Okay, so this is... everything about this movie is so random.
Oh, I know. That's half the fun of it.
I guess, for starters, you could tell me a little bit of backstory, like what you know about this, and maybe how you found this movie, because I had never heard of this movie before you mentioned it.
Well, so the background of this movie, there was a place back in the 60s called Pirates World, and it was kind of like a precursor to Disney World. It was the park itself was about 3 hours south of Orlando, so down by like Miami and such. And I think it was just called Pirates World because, you know, hey, woohoo pirates or whatever. But it was opened in 1967, and they had, I think, 15 different rides, and they had stuff from World's Fairs that had gone on. I think they got a tower called the Crow's Nest that had been originally as part of the New York World's Fair of 1964. They got stuff from Coney Island. There was kind of stuff all over the place. Stuff like, you know, it was a typical amusement park for that time. Also, as time went on, they did a lot of rock concerts. So they hosted concerts for like Led Zeppelin and Grateful Dead and David Bowie. So it must have been quite a venue.
So I take it this place does not exist anymore.
No, it closed down in looks like it was, depending upon where you look, it's either 1973 or 1975.
If it was 73, I blame this movie for killing it.
You're not 100% wrong. Actually, these were, I guess, I don't understand a lot of it, but they did do a ton of film and TV programs, and maybe that's because of where it was located. Ultimately, it was Disney that took them out. They couldn't keep up with what Disney offered in the grand scheme. Just as for size and like the power that Disney had behind them with the movie studios and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the movie that we're talking about today, there's actually 2 different versions of it. It's kind of like a donut thing. The open and the close are the same, but the middle piece of it, the kind of jelly filling, very, very weird jelly filling, is 2 basically featurettes. Like one is Jack and the Beanstalk and the other one is Thumbelina. And from what I've seen, these 2 movies, as well as one other one that was its own independent thing, were done in 1970 at kind of the height of when they were doing all their concerts and such. And then they put the Santa Claus and the ice cream bunny pieces on the outside of it in 1972. And then whether you judge it as one way or the other, it shut down in 73 or 75.
So what's the other story that wasn't ever included in this?
It's called Musical Mutiny, and there's not
Oh, not
really
a
a
fairy
ton
tale.
on it. Yeah. So otherwise, all it lists is several films and TV programs were filmed on site. So I'm sure, back in the 70s, it was, be like California. You've got good weather all the time. Hey, we
Hmm.
need an amusement park. Let's do this.
I'm just wondering where the idea for this movie came from. It is so weird.
I wish I had any possible kind of ideas. I imagine, because I really don't. I mean, Thumbelina definitely highlights a lot of the park, so you could see it being like a promotional piece that you might show in theaters. Because back in the day, you'd have, and I don't know if the 70s or the 60s and 70s so much, but you would have those features that would roll in theaters, and they'd talk about, hey, go here or go there. They had news and everything else, so why not features for things like this? Jack and the Beanstalk is a total mystery as far as what it was supposed to do, because they really don't show the park the way that they do with Thumbelina. I really don't know.
Yeah, it just there's none of these movies feel connect. I feel like I watched three different movies.
Well, you really did, honestly. I mean, truthfully. Well, and
Yeah.
the you were asking where I found it. So there's a group of, I guess, professional riffers by the name of Riff Tracks, and they were originally part of Mystery Science Theater 3000. And one of the things they
Okay.
do is find really obscure things, really just random things. So I think Santa and the Ice Cream Bunny was in the public consciousness before this, because I did find a review from 2011 done by Cinemassacre, which is on YouTube. So it was known. And I'm not 100% sure when Rift Tracks did their thing. The one I saw was Jack and the Beanstalk, which was the lesser known of the two.
Okay.
But I'm assuming it'd be like The Room or any of the other kind of weird movies. They were there, they were known. It was just a matter of finding them. And obviously they
Okay.
become well known enough through riff tracks and things like that, where they're more easy to find.
I get that makes sense. This is like the perfect movie for somebody to do something like a riff tracks thing over top of.
Oh yeah,
It's so
100%.
weird.
Well, and there's so many awkward pauses.
Yeah. There's a lot of awkward everything in this
Oh
movie.
yeah, that is for sure.
It's just so I don't even know how to describe it. There's so many things where it feels like I don't know. It feels incredibly amateurish at times. Like it doesn't feel like somebody who was like an actual filmmaker made this. It feels like something that somebody just did.
Oh, 100%. You can tell by at least, well, I shouldn't say that. There are pieces that work. They knew the basics. Like if you look at the rear projection stuff that they used when Jack is stealing from the giant, or when
Mm,
Thumbelina's mom is talking to her in the background. It's not greatly done, but it is still done, with some measure of understanding of it. But then you
mm-hmm.
look at some of the stuff. Like at the beginning of the movie, you've got Santa's quote unquote elves working in their shop, and the one little elf goes to look outside, and they show a shot of her from outside, and the wall is so clearly corrugated cardboard. It's like what it's not even well painted.
And it was just stock footage of reindeer in the wild.
Oh yeah, which I mean, that's not totally unusual for that time or place, but it's a thing. So that's as far as what I've been able to understand, kind of the history of this as far as it goes. Looking at the two pieces, I do know, according to Rift Tracks at least, Thumbelina was the version that was really really well known, and the Jack and the Beanstalk version was something that was found much later, or maybe wasn't as common.
Okay. Well, the Jack and the Beanstalk one was a lot shorter. I looked at the time; it was just over an hour, and then the Thumbelina movie, it was like almost an hour and a half, I believe.
Yeah, it was actually, I think it was like right at an hour 35, and there aren't any credits. It just stops.
Yeah. So the Thumbelina thing was basically a movie in itself, before they tacked on the beginning and the end. The Jack and the Beanstalk one is more of a long short.
Yeah, I would say. Because it was probably half an hour at best.
Yeah.
Well, shall we dive into the weirdness that are these two movies?
Yeah.
3 movies?
Yeah. Yeah, really. 3 completely unrelated movies that somehow are the same movie.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like Jekyll and Hyde, but doesn't make quite as much sense. Plus 1 extra Jekyll and or Hyde.
When this first started, I didn't even realize that these were supposed to be Santa's elves. I thought it was just some sort of weird kids play, because it was just these kids doing stuff. And I guess looking back, it makes sense it was Santa's elves, but it just seemed like some sort of weird church play with all these kids singing this song, and they weren't very good. But
oh yeah. The music in this thing across the board is so spectacularly bad. It's just I mean, and Thumbelina had moments of good, but the rest, oh dear God.
No, I looked up Thumbelina specifically because it seemed like she maybe had some talent and maybe she was something. And I feel like she's the only person on IMDb that had like an actual photograph. So she did play in other things later too.
Nice. Nice. Did you notice too that the door handle actually was a door or was a hand?
It looked like something. I wasn't sure what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, the quality was kind of lacking as far as, well, and it was done in the 70s, or at least at the latest, or at the earliest, or at the latest it was done in the 70s. It could have been done in the late 60s too.
Yeah, there was, I mean, the film quality was such that there were a lot of places where I couldn't tell exactly what I was looking at. Like later on, when there's a bird in Thumbelina, I had no idea that was a bird. Not until they later said that it was a bird and you saw it outside.
Yes, yes. Well, and calling him Mr. Bird probably helped too, but you know.
Yeah, that's how I figured out it was supposed to be a bird.
Nice, nice. Deductive reasoning is always a good thing. And, you know, they did such a great job of being subtle with their names. I mean, it's spectacular.
Yeah.
So starting off, Santa's missing from the North Pole, and they don't say exactly when it is. Like every time I've watched this, I assumed it was maybe like summer.
That's what, okay, they say like 3 different things in the movie of when it's supposed to be. Like time has no meaning in any of these stories.
No, it truly doesn't. It absolutely doesn't.
I think at the end they might say that it's 4 days till Christmas.
They do there.
But at the beginning, the way they're talking, like he says something about it's the time of year when he goes around the world seeing who's been good. I guess I just assumed that they meant summer because it looked like summer. But I've never been to Florida, so I don't know what Florida looks like in December, so I don't know.
But even that in mind, you still would expect it to be at the very late. I mean, and this is rationalizing things that they probably gave no thought to.
Yeah.
But you would think if they're going to go check out and see who's good and bad, it's at the very latest early spring. That way they have all the time to, you know, have all these kids sit there and pet, you know, Snoopies and Raggedy Anns, you know, for a solid 10 months or
with the
months.
Camera uncomfortably close to them.
Oh my God. The shooting in this. Yeah. Again, we're putting way more, you know, emphasis or thought into this than they ever did, but my God.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and even like this thing about it's the time of year where he goes around the world to see who's been good. Like, when has that ever been a thing? It's just Santa is omniscient. Why does he need to go around the world observing children individually?
Well, since when did Santa get stuck in like an inch of sand?
That too. That was ridiculous. They were talking about like he was so stuck. He like the whole premise of this movie is he's stuck and he can't get out. And the sleigh looks like it's made of tin foil, and I could have pushed it over if I just touched one finger to it.
Well, that goes to show that you are stronger than Santa. All of his reindeer, an ape, a guy in an ape suit, a donkey, a pig, a sheep, a cow, and a horse.
That was utterly ridiculous. Well, when it first showed him in the sand, I was like, how can that be Santa's sleigh when he has room for himself and himself only? Where is he going to put the presents? Like, I'm thinking way too logically about this, but
That's
really,
okay.
if this is Santa's sleigh, and maybe this is just his practice sleigh when he goes around observing children, which sounds
Well,
really bad, but still, there's no room for literally anything on this thing.
well, considering the size of Santa's workshop, maybe it's like the TARDIS, it's bigger on the inside.
Maybe. It, it was ridiculous. And Santa Santa is weird. Like he's I think there's something wrong with Santa. I thought at first he was like drunk or something. He's like singing this song about woe is me and he's like waving his arms around. I'm like, what is wrong with this man?
Oh, and then I don't know. Part of me thought that it was maybe like, because obviously it was ADR, or it was pretty damn
Hmm.
close to being ADR.
I don't think his mouth was moving for most of this. They
Well, and
just
you
recorded the
couldn't.
lines over top.
Yeah, but the thing is, even with the lines, it was such a like stream of consciousness kind of like verbiage.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
It
what
was
was
so weird. There was
it?
like no
Yeah,
script.
yeah, I know. And it was just like, oh well, maybe I'll put on my belt now, and oh, I've got to make sure that it's tight, and oh, you'll help me, won't you, ice cream bunny? Yes, yes, we'll get out of here, and it'll be awesome. And it's just what?
Yeah. I there was something wrong with this Santa.
Yes, yes, there was. Or the definitely at least the guy that did the voiceover work, because oof,
Uh,
it's a thing,
well then,
definitely a thing.
I don't really know what they were going for with all these kids because ostensibly these children are supposed to be helping Santa. But like when you first see all these kids, they're like all over the county or whatever. They're playing. And I think Santa is like telepathically calling them or something.
Pretty sure you're right. That's always what I got from it. But there was the one kid with like the patio umbrella that was jumping off like a two-story building.
And he froze in midair. It was like, is this kid gonna die?
What if Santa on the beach is like purgatory?
I don't know what they were going for with the kids freezing. Like, that made no sense. Was that supposed to be, like, were they literally freezing or what? I didn't understand what that even was supposed to mean.
I don't know, but there were so many places where it was just like they froze at really awkward times. Like there were the two kids that were wrestling, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, like the one is tossing the other, like kind of rolling over with the other one, kind of somersaulting him over his head, and it stops like mid action.
Uh huh. It was
And
bizarre.
and then he named like all these boys, and then there was a set of girls, and he's like girls.
Girls!
And then on the other, there was one other set of kids that was like a brother and sister, and he's like, kids. It's like, so what? What are you trying to say with this?
It made no sense. It made
Mm-mm.
no sense. And the kid who jumped off the roof with the patio umbrella, he like ran off screen. But then later on, this whole crowd of kids runs past that house, including the kid who jumped off the roof. So he like ran in one direction, but then came from the other direction and ran in that direction again.
At one point too, they ran through like I don't know if it was like a junkyard, or maybe like the back lot of the of Pirates World, where there was just maybe like a bunch of stuff that was rusting. It was just like, okay, that's probably not safe to run through there.
I don't think it's safe to have a child jump off a roof with a patio umbrella for your movie either.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But you know, some of the things. So maybe we should give context to this. So Santa calls or telepathically calls all these kids, and he explains how upset he is over being stuck in the sand. And then the kids try to go off to find animals to help pull Santa out of the sand, out of an inch of sand, literally.
Yes.
And so they bring like a pig, they bring a sheep, and then a cow, and then they bring this giant horse. And this one kid is trying to push on the horse, and all I could think was, even if the kid knows how to work with the horse, that's kind of dangerous.
Yeah. Really. And that's not how you get a horse to move anyway. And you don't send a little child to do this. I hope that they purposely got a very tame horse because horses can kill people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm
And
sure that they
especially
probably.
a child that short.
Yeah. I mean, he was maybe 6. You think 7?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not good with telling kids' ages, but they were all pretty young.
Yeah, yeah, they were, and yeah, it's like I don't know. All I could think was, these reindeer like flew off and couldn't get you out of the sand. Are you seriously expecting a kid with a horse or a pig to do that?
That made no sense. Like, I couldn't figure out exactly what he wanted the kids and or the animals to do for him, because it seemed at first like that he was stranded because the magic reindeer were gone. He couldn't fly to the North Pole. But then later on, I realized that he just wants them to pull him out of the sand. And I'm like, okay, well, once you get out of the sand, how are you supposed to get back to the North Pole anyways? And then that question is not even answered by the end, because we'll get there, but I'm very confused by what was going to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and then there was a little weird side thing with Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn.
Yeah. I did not understand that at all. Like, what was the point? You're running by all these kids who ran by the house that the other one jumped off of, also run by this creek. And there's 2 kids out on a little log raft. I was like, are they, like, paying homage to Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn? But then they call each other Tom and Huck, so it is literally Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. And they also have a feral raccoon that does not want to be there at all. And these kids, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, have not been telepathically called by Santa. They're just curious as to where these other kids are going. So they follow them and watch from the bushes for the entire movie and do nothing else.
Oh, pretty much, yeah. Oh, and they're gonna probably try and get someone. They're gonna try and talk someone into paint a fence white for them, I'm sure, later.
It made no sense. I was so confused why they were even there.
So looking at IMDb, it says that they made cameos because the director wanted to try and make a Tom Sawyer film, but he gave up after 1 day of filming. So the footage was likely included to help pad the film.
Okay. That's a very bizarre reason to put a scene in a film.
You know what? I've heard stranger, but yeah, it's definitely outside the box of normality. I'll say it.
This whole movie is outside the box of normality.
Yes, it is. Absolutely it is.
And another thing that kept happening through a lot of this was I think it was like either one or multiple people with kazoos playing in the soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes I couldn't even understand what the people were saying because of the kazoo noises.
Well, kazoos add everything, I mean, what would Star Wars be? Knowing how good Star Wars is, just like the original trilogy, can you imagine how more awesome it would have been with kazoos?
That feels like something that someone has probably made a YouTube video out of.
I do not doubt it in the slightest. Honestly, it kind of sounds like Robot Chicken, like something Robot Chicken would do.
Yeah, kinda. Well, talking about the time, too, another thing that was also confusing was because since they talked about, like, this is the time when he's going around the world seeing who's been good or whatever, then after the kids have left, I think, the first time, because the kids leave and come back multiple times in this movie, and he's sitting alone, and he's saying stuff like, I've got to get out all those little boys and girls around the world waiting for their presents. I'm like, okay, so when is this movie supposed to be set?
I don't think
they made it seem like it was the night before Christmas. Like he's in dire straits here.
Oh yeah, well, and unless he was stuck there for like a solid 6 months, which I imagine his suit got pretty smelly after a while, being how much he constantly talked about how warm he was.
Yeah, and I was like, why don't you ask the kids to get you like a tank top and some shorts if you're that hot? And he's like, through the whole movie, he's complaining about how hot he was. And at one point, I think towards the end, he like actually takes off his coat, but it's only for like a minute, and then he puts it back on again because people are coming and they can't see him without his coat. Like his t-shirt is somehow so secretive.
Well, he doesn't want to show off those massive guns he's got going on.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
Yep, I think so. I mean, you can't haul around toys all year and not be buff.
Okay. You've solved the mystery.
I'm glad we have because I don't think they put much thought into it, if we're being honest.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you were saying with all the animals, like at one point he falls asleep after all the kids have run away, and he's awoken by this grunting noise, and it's a gorilla.
Yep. Oh yeah.
There's a little girl is leading a giant gorilla who is obviously a person in a gorilla suit by the hand to get him to pull out the sleigh. And I'm like, what? Where? First of all, where did this girl get the gorilla? Did she go to a zoo and steal a gorilla?
More
Or
than
does her
likely.
family like illegally breed gorillas and this is just her pet?
It's part of a secret underground program run by Pirates World.
Oh, okay. It's
And
one of their
the
features
program.
they were advertising.
Oh yeah, 100%. And then they actually got found out by people, and that's why they closed down and they just blamed Disney.
Okay. Perfect. I knew it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Considering how much sense these movies make, we could say that space aliens caused all of it, and it would be just as realistic as what was probably true.
Then right after this gorilla comes through, somebody else brings a donkey, and like you said with the just narrating off the cuff, he's like, well, I guess we'll try that too. I guess we're ready to try just about anything. As if a donkey makes less sense than a gorilla. Like the donkey could have been like the first thing and it would have made perfect sense.
Oh, 100%.
But he's acting like the donkey makes no sense.
Oh yeah, I know. Well, and it's like then they bring in a pig, and it's like that the donkey at least, is an animal that hauls things.
Yes.
A pig
yes.
is not universally known for being a good hauler of things.
Yeah, if anything, the donkey was the thing that made the most sense. And they acted like it was the thing that made the least sense.
Well, comedic timing of a good placed donkey is always good, I guess.
I mean, I was thinking about how this could be improved by comedic timing, and really, you could start with the donkey and then just get more and more ridiculous, finally ending on the ape. Instead, they started out with the ape and ruined what could have been a hilarious moment.
Well, this movie is hilarious for all the wrong reasons, so
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. They could have had one moment of brilliance if we're being honest. So
For this whole thing, I was thinking somebody needs to remake this, but make it better. Like, keep the weirdness, but just, like, make it better. And that's one way they could do that.
I think we had this discussion with Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, too.
I think we did, actually. I mean, both of these movies, they're so ridiculous, but they're so entertaining at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's what makes for a great riffing thing. Yeah, they come across with a few different animals after that, and I don't know. They gave up then, and Santa is like, did he sing a song at that point? Like after they tried all the animals? I forget.
I don't remember if he sang a song at that point. He sang a bunch of weird songs in this movie. Everybody sang weird songs in this movie.
Oh my god. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. That there is one thing that pervades across this entire thing. It's really like unrhythmic songs. Like not
Yeah.
like the rhyming schemes are just so off.
Yeah, and even sometimes they would, in dialogue, they would be like random rhymes. And I'm like, if you wanted to do this rhyming, why not like actually write this whole thing out instead of just rhyming things here and there?
Oh yeah. I don't I guess I've seen it done in other like kind of like not so great movies. But I think it was probably done on purpose in those cases. Like here, like whatever they did, I feel like they genuinely did it with the intent of it being like very honest. And I don't who looked at this song and went, "Oh yeah, this is a great song. I think we should totally use it."
I don't know. Especially any song that happened during the Santa stuff. Like some of the other ones, I guess I could be more forgiving in the fairy tale stuff because it felt like they put a little more work into them.
Yeah,
But the
they made
Santa
some
stuff
sense.
was just why?
Yeah, it was like they wrote all the songs in probably 10 minutes apiece with the same bass melody.
Yeah, it feels like they put about that much work into them.
It does. It totally does. I mean, and just the long extended periods of just nothing. There wasn't even any like, and not that you need a ton or that maybe they didn't think about it, but like there's absolutely no like just background noise. Like, there's no natural sounds anywhere. You're right next to the beach, right next to the water. There should
Oh,
be something.
you're right. I didn't even think about that. That is weird. There's other things too where you could tell that the sound was just off. Like at one point, there's this dog that's barking, but the
Oh God.
barks do not match the dog. And at one point, the dog on screen is not barking, but there's still dog barking noises.
Oh yeah, it's like at least the sound is at least 2 seconds off, and I'm not sure if that's maybe like a time thing or like a bad dub. I just assumed that all of it was
I
like
don't know.
recorded in post, but that's weird to say because why would you record a dog bark in post?
Yeah, I don't know. There's so many confusing things about this
Yeah.
movie.
I mean, a lot of movies, and even now, there are movies that like low budget ones that can't afford audio equipment, and they'll go back and re-record everything.
Hmm.
But to have it be that far off, even in a relatively low budget production, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, at this point, this is like the end of the first half of the Santa things, because after they try all this stuff, the kids, they're all sitting back in the sand again. There's no shot like showing them coming back. They're just all there
Yep,
suddenly. There's
Santa's
a lot of
magic.
things that happen like that. And he decides he needs to tell them a story to show them why they should have courage and faith. And this is where the movie splits off in one of two directions, depending on which version you're watching. Either Jack and the Beanstalk or Thumbelina. Because that's such a natural place to take this story.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're talking courage and faith, there are no two better movies to convey that than Jack and the Beanstalk and Thumbelina.
Yeah. So you said that Thumbelina was the most known one.
To my knowledge, from what I've seen on riff tracks, and they for whatever they are, like they do a lot of goofy stuff, but they tend to be pretty thorough with how they investigate things. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to say, "Oh, well, this is this movie from here and whatever else." They do their research because even if they're riffing on them, they still try and be respectful of the source material.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
they said that the Thumbelina one goes back further in them riffing on it as well as just it's being more well known. In one of their shows, they mentioned that they just found a copy that hadn't been seen by many folks. So whether that just meant, and they might have been, blowing it up a little bit more than than it actually was. But I think the Thumbelina one, from what I've seen, is definitely more out in the open space.
Mm-hmm.
It's well known by more. If you know this movie, it's the Thumbelina version that you know.
I'm just curious as to why they made two different versions.
And I'm not sure. I guess it could be like the Snyder Cut and the theatrical release of the Justice League movie.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe they made one and it didn't go over that well, so they were like, let's try again, but let's stick this other story in there and change nothing else about it.
Yeah. Well, and they might have just thought because it looks like I mean, they looked like they were like Pirates World looked like they were pretty prolific with their film production. So maybe they thought, because the original movies came from 1970, so it could have been a case of, hey, we had pretty good success adding Santa on the front and the back of Thumbelina. What if we tried with Jack and the Beanstalk?
Hmm.
Or it could have been like, test audiences. I mean, well, I doubt they did test audiences, but maybe it was like, they did multiple versions to see which one worked best. And
I
being
guess
the Thumbelina.
that makes more sense. Like
Right. I'm just
maybe one was
guessing.
more
Go ahead.
widely released than the other. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because the one didn't test well.
It could have been. It could have also been like being that the Thumbelina one does actually show the park. It shows not that it's even by that time standards. I can't think that it would have been like all that interesting because the story of Thumbelina starts with kind of a diorama of like the world of Thumbelina, and then you've got narration coming over a speaker. for whatever that is, that does show more of the park. And they do show this the girl that goes on to sort of be Thumbelina in the actual small or the second part of the movie. It does show her like going on the different rides and having a good time. Kind of, it does show
So
off
that
the
was
park
the
more.
same actress then.
I think so. Yeah, it looked like her.
That was so weird. I could not figure out what they were doing there at first because it's like you're watching this movie and then all of a sudden he's supposed to be telling the story of Thumbelina. But you're following this girl who is very obviously in modern day, modern for the time. It's very obviously 60s or 70s. And you're following her around, and it's like, this is not Thumbelina. But there's this song singing, If I Were Thumbelina, as she's wandering around this park. And it has actual credits. Like it's a whole nother movie inside this other movie.
Exactly. And
It's
I'm
so
assuming,
weird.
yeah, and I'm thinking that she's just like seeing herself in this since with the song being if I were Thumbelina.
Maybe that's it. I don't know. But I guess I was wondering if it was the same person because they look similar. But that I guess makes sense. One of the lines that in the song, like even if they put more thought into the song, some of the lines still were just bizarre. Because one of the lines was, "If I were Thumbelina, a mouse would be as big as me upon my birthday cake." At least I think that's what she said, and I was like, "What?" A mouse? It's just like if she on the birthday cake, or is the mouse on her birthday cake? And either way, why?
Well, if she was on her birthday cake, who would eat the birthday cake?
I don't know. I was very confused.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all.
But yeah, this whole opening thing, it just seemed like it was a commercial for this park. And I guess that kind of was.
Oh yeah.
But
That's what I always thought as. So
it still made no sense narratively to have like he's supposed to be telling the story of Thumbelina, but if what you're seeing on screen is literally what he's telling the kids, he's also telling them about this Pirates World park and about all the rides that are at Pirates World and about this girl who's wandering around Pirates World.
and the thing is, they are clearly right next to Pirates World because at the end, when we get our other titular character, he rides through Pirates World to get out to help Santa. So it's really weirdly meta.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's so
Yes.
weird. But yeah, when you're in the park, you have this narrator who is talking, and I couldn't figure out who the narrator was supposed. You figured out later, but I couldn't figure out who the narrator was supposed to be. She was just talking about Thumbelina living with her a while, but she sounded kind of like. I mean, she was coming out of a speaker, so it sounded like an old timey radio voice or something.
Mm-hmm.
But like you're following this girl walking through these dioramas that were supposed to be where Thumbelina lived, or the story of Thumbelina, or whatever. So you're having Santa telling the story about this other person telling the story of Thumbelina.
And my eyes just went crossed.
It's so weird.
Oh, it totally is. I never thought about that, but you're right. It is totally like a story within kind of a story.
Yeah, it's it's just bizarre. This whole movie is bizarre.
It is. Well, and the other weird thing is too, so they obviously have the little movie within it. So, you have the person that's being told the story of Thumbelina, and then they go into the actual movie, but then they come out of it at certain times.
Yeah,
You see the speaker, you see the girl listening to the story, you even see the dioramas.
yeah. It's just bizarre.
Oh, it is totally bizarre. It's yeah, a total acid trip, I think.
So this narrator is talking about Thumbelina and I guess her mother, or her adoptive mother, who she says that she was an aging spinster
Oh,
who
the way
wanted a
that they
child.
define, and I'm not trying to get on my high horse, But the way that they define women in this, like it's
Yeah.
so I remember loving Thumbelina as a kid, and I know that they didn't go all these directions, but just it's so and I understand it was this late 60s, early 70s, but it just I don't know how to define it. It's just it's like you say, it is such a weird it's a weird thing from every angle, but especially from a narration standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
They bring up so much stuff that it's not going to matter to a kid. They're not going to care.
Yeah.
And unless I don't know, I haven't I don't I've seen plenty of Thumbelina like movies and TV shows, but I don't remember reading a book. Would that have been the verbiage that they used in a book?
Maybe. I mean, there was a lot of things in Thumbelina, especially, where it felt like they were using a book to guide the filmmaking process because there was so many things that they put in here that they should have just cut for time or fleshed out more because it was like a narrator said something and then it was completely glossed over, moved on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So maybe it was a book that somebody found and they just used the book as their script.
I would almost think they would have had to, given how this is laid out and the verbiage and everything else. Like, it doesn't, it doesn't sound like a movie. I guess it doesn't sound like a play or a movie script. It's so almost third person, even when they're talking in first person.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was also really weird. Like, even though this person, I don't think she's that old, but they're calling her an aging spinster, she looks like maybe she's early 60s at the very oldest.
Oh yeah.
I don't the witch that she goes to, the good witch who dresses like an evil witch. Not that matters, but it's like you're calling her a good witch, but then you're dressing her like a stereotypical evil witch.
Well, especially for that time.
Yeah. She says, "You're too old to have a child. Children need the guidance of someone much younger." I'm like, what? I mean, typically, yes, parents are younger than this, but I mean, the older you are, the more wisdom you have gained. And I would think that someone her age would make a perfectly fine parent.
Oh,
but
yeah,
they're acting
totally.
like this is ridiculous that this person who might be 60 could want a child.
Oh man, yeah, and it's I just the way that it's put out there. I mean, she's like, oh yeah, yeah, I definitely am, but I have been lonely, and it's just
It was weird.
it is so strange, and you don't expect them to necessarily have the greatest actors in the world, but the way that everything is said is just so like. Can we get into the take of that, maybe, please?
Another weird thing in this scene was the witch was singing a song, a very long song,
Oh, it
in
was
which she
massively.
repeated lines and stories, like the story about the duck. It was told twice in the song, and part of the song goes that she'll need 12 new pennies to make her wish come true. And then later she says, "Do you know how much this will cost?" I'm like, you literally sang the line at least twice, if not three times, that it cost 12 pennies.
Well, maybe it's a conversion thing. You know, it's 12 pennies in witch money, but in regular human money, it's, $1,000 or something.
I think it was just 12 pennies because she had a little tiny sack that she started rooting around in for some coins.
Wow. I would have expected a little girl to go for a little bit more than 12, or the wish to have a child to go for a little bit more than 12 pennies, but
I
hey,
mean, she was tiny, so
that's true. Well, and that was kind
you
of
get
that
what you
was
pay for.
that is true. I did like the little like there was that little she's like, "Oh, I'd like a little girl." And she's like, "Are you sure you want a little girl?"
I didn't even catch
Wow.
that.
Wow, that's quite the, ha 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 moment there. Props though, the songs were at least like you said, they were better. They
Yeah.
weren't great. And the rhyming schemes were driving me absolutely nuts. But yeah, the way that they worked was more, you could tell there had been time spent on it.
There was also time spent singing them,
Oh yeah. Holy crap, that yeah. That was
especially in
insane.
Thumbelina.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that one was the awkward pauses and the long
Mm,
songs and just all of it. You could have made that the whole thing half an hour without breaking a sweat and you wouldn't have lost anything.
yeah, the the story that I felt like not a whole lot happened, even though a lot happened. It not a whole lot happened because a lot of it happened through the narration. Like the narrator would just say something happened, and then you move on to the next thing.
Exactly. Like
So you really could have just cut it way down.
oh yeah, like the whole oh, a fish came along and cut
And you
the
never
plant
even see the
holding.
fish. At that point, I thought those things that came by maybe they were the fish,
Oh
but
my
apparently
god.
they weren't.
They were bugs of some sort and I to this day I've watched this a couple of times. I cannot tell you what those are supposed to be.
No, because I thought they were fish because of the thing about the chewing the lily pad so she could escape, which you never see. You just
Right.
you just move on to these things coming along. I was like, well, I guess those are the fish. And then you got kind of a close up on them. I was like, those are not fish.
Nope.
They must be birds. So for the rest of the movie, I thought they were birds until the end when she literally recaps the entire story and calls them bugs.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Well, in the stripe wise, I thought maybe they could be like bees, but then there's nothing that indicates like they're not. I don't know. Maybe they were supposed to be fantastical bugs of some nature, but
I don't
I don't
know.
know.
They looked like crows, but they had four arms. I was just so confused.
Yeah. If that's all you are after this movie, we're doing okay. Well, and two, like with the fish thing. So in the story, the frogs come along, and the mama frog wants to find a mate for her son, and somehow she finds Thumbelina, and she steals her in the night, and she puts her on a lily pad and goes and gets her son. And then you see, like in the diorama of the Thumbelina story, you see like the lily pad, and it just sits on that shot for what feels like ever.
Yeah. While the narrator's talking.
Yeah, yeah, essentially. I mean, it's a
I
good
guess they just
solid.
didn't have the budget to film a fish chewing through the lily pad root.
Well, and you could have used something like what they had a bunch of mushrooms. You could have used like a mushroom and just changed the top of it to be a lily pad.
That's another reason why I think they were probably going off of a specific story version that they found somewhere,
It's very possible.
because they didn't seem to make any changes that made sense for the story they were telling. Like if they had something that was probably too hard to film, they just told it in narration and then panned back out to the real world of this girl walking through the diorama.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Well, do you even think though, I mean, and I will say, for as for as cheesy as this is, what they did, they it felt like a well done play to some extent. Like, they put stuff into the costumes and
Mm-hmm.
stuff and into the background. I mean, it wasn't, that the mushrooms were 3D. There was effort put into it for the most part. Much more so
I
than the open and the close of the damn movie, but
Yeah, if this had been a play that I was watching like at a theater, maybe like an amateur play, I would have no complaints because
oh yeah.
they did put a lot of work into this. But the fact that they're trying to sell this as this big thing, this movie, and it's not,
Well,
that's what brings it down.
and even in that, with that in mind, though, if this was used as a promotional piece for the park, it's not going to be held to the same standard as a movie made even with an independent budget. I mean,
Hmm.
this was a glorified, not to say that it's a commercial, but it's kind of a glorified commercial.
Yeah, especially the beginning and end of the Thumbelina segment.
Exactly, and that's probably, and like the Santa stuff was like we talked about, tacked on. So I'm assuming like it was meant to show. I don't know, like the
I don't know
emphasis
what
wasn't.
this was meant to show.
I don't know. All I can guess, all I've been ever been able to guess, that this was some kind of a promotional piece to say, "Hey, look, that we do this thing." I mean, even if you think Disney at the time, if I don't remember when Disney started up in Florida, but if they were putting out like pieces then, I would imagine that Pirates World was probably just trying to keep up with them to some extent.
It could be.
Oh, well, we should probably get back into this craziness. Where did we
Yeah.
leave off? It was
Well, we were talking about the frogs, but we did miss one thing. The when she's at the witch gives her a seed, and she says, "Treat her well. Someday she will be a princess." I'm like, okay. I mean, it's a fairy tale, so I don't know how this witch knows this, but it got weirder later.
it did. It got
So
weird quickly.
yeah. So she goes home. She plants the seed. In seconds, a flower grows, and a tiny little girl comes out. And she gives her a walnut shell bed. And I don't know if anyone has seen like an actual walnut. They're not that big. Like
No.
they're barely the size of a golf ball.
Yeah, it's like a maybe an inch, inch and a half.
So I don't know. I don't know why they said that she was going to have a walnut shell bed, because if you're going with the size, her being big enough or small enough to fit inside a walnut, her size throughout this whole thing does not make sense.
No, they
Her
weren't
size
very.
is never consistent.
Oh no, no, and in both stories, and I guess again, there's probably that. Oh, it's a walnut shell. We'll just call it good. But yeah, there's no there's no consistency across either one of these, and it's funny because you have Thumbelina on one end of the spectrum where you're dealing with massively small things, and
Hmm.
then on the other end of it, you're dealing with the giant and Jack and the Beanstalk, and you're dealing with things that are huge.
Yeah, I wonder if they did that on purpose. I don't.
You know,
Probably not.
I have no
It's probably a
idea.
coincidence.
It's probably coincidence, but damn, they had yeah. I would almost bet that they were probably props that they had laying around. Not that you would keep a walnut shell bed on hand, but
Well, the thing with the walnut shell bed, though, well, first of all, it was not round enough to be a walnut shell. It looked like a turtle shell.
yeah, it
But
wasn't deep enough either.
no, and they also had it next to a mug, but it was the same size as the mug. So either this is a really tiny little mug or a giant walnut.
Yes. I'm gonna go giant walnut just because. I mean, if you have to think that if Thumbelina's mom could grow a baby girl or a little girl that quickly, I mean, her thumbs must be green as can be. I mean, she's winning like like the giant pumpkins at the county fair. She's winning like with giant walnuts.
Yeah, I guess that I never thought about that, but that makes sense. That's where the walnut came from. The mother grew it.
Oh yeah, totally, totally. And she's just really, really good at growing things, but they grow flat as compared to long or round. She smashed it flat with a hammer. That's why it's so.
Oh, yeah, that's why it looked like a turtle shell. It just got
Exactly.
squished.
Yeah, I'd say that's my go-to. I mean, it makes as much sense as anything else in this movie.
Yes. Well, after this, she's singing a song about dancing on the table, and she's very awkwardly dancing on the table.
Well, be glad you've never seen me on the dance floor because that's how I dance.
I mean, I don't really dance, but I bet I wouldn't be that much better, so I'm probably not one to talk. It
Ah,
just felt weird. And then this is another thing with the time of this movie. She I assumed that this scene took place the same day that she was born out of the flower. But she says in the song, "Other children make me feel so small." She's never met another child if it's the same night that she was
yeah.
born. So I don't know if it's just them not putting thought into this, or there was a time skip, or what.
I don't think they put any time into this. I'm gonna say this, and I'm probably gonna say it a lot. But we're talking about a movie where Santa got trapped in the sand, like an inch of sand. So that in mind, everything else is off the table. Anything is possible.
Yeah.
But having said that, it's also important to have some kind of continuity and where no, and obviously their budgets are probably tight for this, but where an outfit can't even change to tell you some kind of passage of time,
Yeah.
there has
Yeah.
to be something that kind of gives you some semblance of something like, oh, baby, you've been here a week, or hey, here's a cake to celebrate your month birthday or whatever it might be.
They do have things that sort of do that, but at the same time, the scene never changed. So it's like they're telling you that time has passed, but visually, time did not pass.
No. Well, and you could have done small indicators. It wouldn't have even had to be anything big, even the moving of a mug.
Yeah, yeah, no, the mug stayed in the same place.
Right. Or, if she's on a bed and all she does is, stay on the table, maybe give her some other things to play with, or something to occupy her time.
Yeah.
I mean, one can only play with a mug so much.
She just practiced her awkward dancing.
Well, there you go. Gosh, if that's her awkward dancing after several days or weeks or hours of practice, can you imagine how bad she was when she started?
Oh, no, I can't. This is about where the point where we talked about the scene before, because this is where the narrator takes over and talks about the frog. And you briefly do see the frog, and he sounds familiar, like some, I don't know, dumb character from another movie. I don't know who he's supposed to sound like, but he sounded familiar. But you never see these frogs interacting with Thumbelina in any way, even though she was kidnapped and going to be forced to marry this frog. All of that was told through the narrator. You briefly see the frogs, and then you see Thumbelina after she has escaped, but you never see anything that happened in between that. The narrator just explains the whole thing.
Yep. You pretty much did it as well as they did.
Basically.
And your visuals are much more entertaining.
And this is where she meets the fish bird bug things. And
officially, I want to become a scientist and come up with a fish bird bug thing.
Oh, that sounds like nightmare fuel.
Oh, it does. It does. It definitely does. You have no idea. It will scare the pants off everybody.
And at the same time, she's wandering through the forest and singing about being scared. The song, thankfully, is mercifully short. This is the only mercifully short song in this whole thing. And then she meets these creatures, and one of them says that they think that she's creepy and they want to mash her.
Yes. Well, and
now knowing that they're bugs, it's like, you're one to talk.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and they had the weird, like, they all had like striped like boxers on, and one had red striped boxers and the other ones had black striped boxers, and it was just like,
is that what those were supposed to be?
I think so. That or it was that or some kind of pattern in their costumes, but to me they looked like boxers or like swim trunks or something.
Well, I couldn't even tell that they were bugs, so you're able to figure out more than me.
Well, it's like, okay, the same head, same body, same legs. Hey, one of them has red stripes. Okay, cool. We've got something that differentiates them.
And around this time, the narrator says that she lived in the forest for days, and her life grew to be fun. She liked living in the forest. So was she even trying to get back to her mother? It didn't seem like she tried very hard to get back to her mother.
No,
it seemed like she forgot about her mother completely.
Oh, well, these ungrateful kids these days.
But then winter comes, and she decides she needs to live underground like the other animals.
Well, first she tries, so her house is like basically just a mushroom. And she tries to like build up sides around it, but she can't because she doesn't have shoes and she's still in the same like super short dress and peasant top that she was born with.
That's right. So does she even like take a bath? Is she maybe magically clean all the time because she always wears the same thing?
I would assume so. I mean, unless, she's going with the back to nature movement, she's kind of a hippie, but
unless this dress is like her skin, which is creepy to think about.
I don't think so. Like everybody else wore pants of some sort, like outside of the weird bug things, unless they were wearing boxers, then even they were wearing pants. So
I think I'm thinking too much about this.
I think you are too, but you know what? This movie will do that to you. Like it gets in your head. You go down spirals or rabbit holes that you wouldn't expect.
And Thumbelina went down a mole hole that we didn't expect.
Yes. Yes, she did. Good transition.
This is where you find out that this voice coming out of the speaker belongs to a mole because Thumbelina is at this door that looks like a human door. And the narrator says, the little girl hesitated to bother us, but was so cold she finally gained enough courage to knock on my door. And then she just says, may I come in? And then goes in. And then
Yep.
later she asks again, may I come in? And she's like, you're already in. I'm thinking you're already inside.
Well, she's trying to make a good impression, I guess. I don't really know. I'm just gonna go with she was trying to be super, super polite.
There's a lot of things that were, she was too polite. She was way too polite.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and the Mrs. Mole, talked about how her husband had left her. He had passed on, but he had left her in good, in good house and all that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like when, well, I guess we'll get to that a little bit later, but she didn't go out and do anything for herself, not even get food or anything. It's just like, do you ever leave your place?
It didn't seem like it.
No. I was kind of confused. Again,
It seems like she's just waiting for death, actually.
yeah, yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
And they never really talk about, I mean, they said that she's a widow basically, but they don't really talk about like how old. And I guess with moles, it's kind of a, relative thing, but
Yeah, I don't know.
again, thinking too much about it.
Well, she's asking about like why she's in the forest. So Thumbelina tells her about the frogs and was supposed to be married to this frog. And the mole tells her that frogs are ugly, and if you're to marry anyone, it should be a mole. Which is a very weird response to this story.
Yes. And to some extent, like you can see it just from perspective wise, like there would have been, if you're looking for like social commentary, which, like you said, I think we can get way too deep into this, but from a social commentary perspective, like you kind of marry within your own kind of groupings. If you're,
Mhm.
a certain religion, you marry someone in that religion, or if you're a certain ethnicity, you marry within that ethnicity. And I don't think it's going that deep, but I kind of pulled that from it one way or the other.
Maybe. And I don't know how much they were thinking about that, though. Because
Very true.
sometimes it seems like there's mixed messages about that, too.
Yeah, it's a weird. If you look at it from a social commentary perspective, which again, as you say, I don't think we can look too deeply at it, but there are definitely things that would be interesting to look at the original Thumbelina story and just see what it says. Like, because it does seem like everybody wants to marry her. It's like, ooh, here's
Yeah.
here's this Thumbelina. Let us marry her. Yay.
That's true. It seemed like every time she met a character, they wanted to marry her.
Or
Other than the bird. Or the
right,
bugs
right.
that wanted to mash her.
Exactly. And Mrs. Mole just wanted her to marry somebody else.
Yeah. But yeah, they do talk a lot about marriage, like right at the beginning when she first moves in there.
Yeah.
So she lives there all winter, and then it's spring, and she's like outside. She's wandering through the woods again. She goes back home, and Mr. Digger is there, who is another mole, and he wants to meet her. And Mr. Digger is a creep. he
A
they
little bit.
like they talk about him like he's this kind, benevolent old man, and all I'm thinking is like I'm getting extreme creeper vibes from this old weirdo.
Oh yeah.
It's like one of the first things he says is she's exquisite. And then he's like, I have an idea. Why don't you come back home with me? And I
Oh
can
god.
show you my collection of things from all over the world. And every time he's talking, I'm thinking he's going to be like, suggest something creepy. And then he goes off in another direction. Ultimately, he does get to, let's get married. But first, there's like a bunch of weird sentences that it's just, he seems like an old creep.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think because they talk about how when he shows off his collection, He's like, "Oh, I got this rug from the finest, rug makers in Persia, or um, uh, not Persia. Oh yeah,
The rug
Persia.
was from Persia. I
Yeah,
remember that.
and I got this lovely stove from the finest people in Hol in the Netherlands, and all this stuff. I think he's so focused on wealth, he sees her as an object, something to be gained to some
That
extent.
makes sense, actually. Yeah. So he's not creepy so much as he is just shallow.
Oh, massively so. And but even Mrs. Mole is like that too. Like
Yeah.
she talks about how when she wants Thumbelina to get married to Mr. Digger, the indication is that, well, I have enough to hold me and store, between food and living space. My husband left me with enough to last me through the end of my days, but with an extra mouth to feed, I can't guarantee that, and I can't guarantee your future. As if she's going to sit with her feet up eating bonbons or something.
Yeah, really.
Not that bonbons come, real easily when you're underground, but you know what I mean.
Maybe they were pillbug bonbons.
Very possibly. Maybe they were made up of those weird bug bird things from earlier.
They would be big bonbons then.
Oh my goodness, they'd be massive.
Yeah, again, there's no size scale thing because like those bugs were as big as the moles.
Yeah, it was interesting. But yeah, that I don't know. Like the moles thing, like I know they're meant to be a sympathetic, like they're sympathetic to her, but yet they're in it for their own thing. They do kind of use her.
They're too focused on material wealth and being practical and whatever.
Right. Very, very old school mentalities, which some of that was good. Like the practicality aspect was excellent. But then you take practicality to, oh, because Thumbelina talks about wanting romance and finding someone her own age. And the moles get into the whole conversation about how, oh, romance is a young man's game, and it's not practical. And it's just like, yeah, but that's the point.
And
Different ages,
she's
different
like 3 days
wants.
old too. I mean,
Exactly.
technically it's more like maybe a year, but like she's pretty young.
Yes, yes. She's a month old trapped in the body of a what 18-year-old or 20-year-old or something.
Something like that. One other thing too is like when they're going back to Mr. Digger's home, they pass by something dead, which I could not tell what it was. Like the quality of the picture has deteriorated so much that I did not know what this thing was that they were
Oh yeah,
passing by.
it's
I
not
thought
good.
maybe it was some kind of blue owl, but I could not tell. It turned out later that it was a bird, but until they said bird in another scene, I did not know what I was looking at.
Well, and the way it was laying too, you really like there was no definable wings. There
Yeah,
was sort of
it
a
was
beak,
just
but
a
not
blue lump.
really. Yeah, basically it was.
And Thumbelina is like, she's feeling sorry for this dead thing that apparently froze during the winter. And Mr. Digger just shrugs it off and says that he's an ugly creature. I'm like, that they're trying, like, within the story, it seems like they're trying to frame Mr. Digger as a good person and he's compassionate. But then he does that, and it's like she's feeling bad about this bird, and he's like, he's an ugly creature. There's mixed messages about what kind of character Mr. Digger has.
Oh yeah. Well, it's about perspective too. You're looking at the perspective of someone that lives underground. He can't see well. He doesn't go outside. He's very trapped in his ways, very much of that mentality of what I know is beautiful and everything else is just kind of eh.
Mm-hmm.
But how he sees Thumbelina as exquisite and the bird as, ugly and nasty. I mean, besides the fact that, he thought it was dead. I mean, I don't know. So
Yeah.
it's a weird. There's just so many of those little lines that you look at and go, what? Where did this come from?
Yeah, like at the end of that scene, he says he now knows that he loves her with all his heart. It's like you literally just met her an hour ago.
Yep. I don't think that's love. That's something else.
Yeah, being a creep.
Yeah, that doesn't help. That certainly doesn't help.
And
So,
also when she leaves, he's humming "Here Comes the Bride" to himself.
oh yeah.
So that does
Oh
not
yeah.
help his creep factor.
No. I started to itch because it was so uncomfortable.
And then Mrs. Mole, who she's the narrator of this thing, and I'm just assuming that she's like a good person too, and I think they want you to think that she's a good person, and the person who wrote this assumes she's a good person, but everything she talks about, she does not come off as a good person because she basically convinces her to marry Mr. Digger because that's the practical thing to do.
Oh
But
yeah.
then in the narration, she says that she didn't realize it at the time, but Thumbelina felt trapped into the marriage. And I'm like, how did you not realize this at the time?
Oh yeah.
She
Well, and they
said she said she didn't want to get married to him.
exactly. Well, and they play it as Thumbelina does it because it's gonna help Mrs. Mole. It's not gonna do. It's not, or it's gonna be good for Mr. Digger because he won't be alone. But there's nothing on it for her, like not even on a surface level.
Mm-hmm. No, nothing.
And it's a weird. It's that part of it. The whole marriage part of it from that perspective is just so incredibly strange.
Yeah.
And then the mole like talks about taking her to Mr. Digger talks about taking her to all of these places. And it's like, how are you going to take her to all these great places when you don't leave the confines of your hole?
No, that was another weird thing. They talked about like before the marriage, she tells her to go outside because it's the last time she would ever see the light. Like they're talking about like she's going to live underground forever now. She's never going to go outside again. I'm
Right.
like, this is not a marriage. This is slavery and
Oh, it was
entrapment.
so strange. It was so strange. Because even a mole would have to go to the surface to get food or something. Like moles don't just live underground.
Yeah. If they did, the cats around here wouldn't have things to chase and eat.
Exactly. Well, see, there you go. Maybe that's why he doesn't go out.
Anyways, throughout this whole thing, she's figured out that this bird is not actually dead, that she passed by earlier, and she has nursed it back to health. And at some point, the bird disappears, like right before her wedding. The bird disappears, and she thinks that it's left forever. And this is the point where she says that she should go outside because it'll be like the last time she'll see the light or whatever she said.
Right.
And the bird is outside. So he just was testing his wings, I guess. I think he planned to come back. But she ends up telling him everything, and he decides that she needs to leave. So the bird is like the only person who actually has a brain in this thing.
Absolutely.
He he tells her that she needs to get out of there, and he'll come back and tell them what happened to her later.
I hope he does it with attitude because they kind of deserve it. But that's another thing too. Like Mrs. Mole was all like, "Oh, well, he leaves right before your wedding, and people these days, you spend all of that time taking care of him, but yet he leaves you all alone." And it's just like that's a really weird line.
Yeah, no, she seemed it like I said, it seemed like they were writing her to be a nice character, but then she'd say something like that. It's like that is not nice.
No, bad Mrs. Mole. We do not approve.
And the whole thing where she's talking about maybe leaving with the bird, she's telling the bird that she doesn't love Mr. Digger, but she respects him, and she appreciates what Mrs. Mole has done for her. And I'm like, this is not like love. This is like Stockholm syndrome.
Oh,
She's
totally
been
is.
trapped with these people, and she just thinks that she cares for them.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, it's a weird tale. It really truly is. And
Yeah.
whether the original was like that or not, I remember the basic parts of it, but some of it is just like some of the verbiage is just weird.
Yeah, this is one I maybe read when I was a kid. I vaguely remember the animated Don Bluth movie.
Oh
I
yeah, yeah.
remember I remember watching, like, we borrowed it from the library and I watched it every day for a week after we borrowed it from the library, and then I've never seen it since. I literally watched it
Hmm.
every day that we had it and then never again.
Aw.
I don't know why.
Well, and I think I probably saw the same one. But yeah, I remember the basic stuff, but I don't remember anything more than that.
Yeah, I think some of this is in there because I have vague memories of a mole, and I know there was a frog, and I'm pretty sure she was going to marry the frog, but I think the frog was a much bigger part of the story.
Mm.
But like it's been a long time, so I don't remember for sure.
So the design on the bird, first time I saw it, I laughed so hard at that. It's just like, what is this?
I'm just imagining the guy inside the costume,
Oh man,
the position that he's in.
I mean, you'd have to be bent at the waist in order to do anything, because the eyes blink. So obviously he's got to control that. He has to control the mouth.
But he's probably not looking forward. He's probably looking at the ground, the position that bird is in.
Oh man, that poor guy. He had to be going to the chiropractor like once a day for a solid month.
Oh yeah, he'd have to.
Oh god, poor guy. Oh, ouch.
One other thing that I liked in this scene that I don't think was supposed to be funny, but I thought it was hilarious. When she's finally decided to leave and he says that he'll go back and tell them what happened to her later. She says, "Tell Mr. Mole I didn't mean to insult him. It's just that I thought I could find a better husband elsewhere."
Best line of the entire movie right there.
And she said it so sincerely. I don't think that they meant it to be funny, but I thought it was hilarious.
Well, it kind of ranks right up there with "you're far too old," or what was it about the parents line?
Something about being far too old to have a child.
Yeah, or the kids are better with younger parents or whatever.
Something like that. Yes, exactly.
So then we get the magical, absolutely, the brilliant practical effects of the flight for the bird and Thumbelina.
They filmed her so that the bird is like in the bottom corner of the screen, so you can't see its legs. So it's obviously just standing somewhere and then slowly flapping its wings.
Oh man. And not even an attempt at like any kind of background. I think the background was just white, wasn't it?
I think it was light blue to simulate sky, but yes, it didn't do anything.
Oh dear God, yeah, that was a thing. That was the thing in this movie.
And another thing too, at this point where they're flying, there's the narrator's talking again. She's saying that they were so disappointed to have her leave so suddenly, but they talked it over and realized that they were asking too much of her. And at the same time that the narrator's talking, Thumbelina and the bird are having a whole other conversation that I did not understand because the narrator was talking over them. The only part that I caught was at the end. They say, "It's the kingdom of the flower children."
Was that also the point where they said that Mr. Digger and Mrs. Mole got married and that they were going to have all the good stuff that they wanted?
That was at the end.
Oh, was it at the end? Okay.
I think so.
Spoilers, I guess.
but at the same time, she's talking about feeling like this is the point where she literally recaps the entire movie. And she's talking about feeling sorry for them. And I'm thinking to myself, she's saying in her recap that she feels sorry for Mr. Digger. She's sure he can find another wife somewhere. And I'm like, why don't the two moles get married? They're like best friends. They live next door to each other. Why don't the moles get married? Because they're moles. And she was talking about the best person to marry is a mole.
Oh yeah.
Just remarry and get married to your neighbor.
Exactly.
Instead of trying to force this
They
little
both have
girl
the same...
to marry him.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, and yeah, I guess, you never know what you have until it's right in front of your face.
Yeah. And then later they apparently do get married because the narration says so, but that would have been the obvious thing to do at the beginning.
Yeah, but then we wouldn't have had that riveting part of the story.
Yeah. That was so weird. Why did they feel the need to recap the entire movie? Like, we literally just watched this, and the movie's not that long to begin with.
I don't know. Length, I suppose? I'm not really sure.
I don't know. It was so bizarre.
But onto the climax of this movie, of this riveting movie. When they discover the flower children.
Yeah. So, like, there was a line in a song somewhere earlier in the movie where she says that she's a flower child, and I just assumed they were referencing, like, the flower children of the hippie movement. Mm-hmm. But no, apparently the flower children are an actual race of people, who are literally born out of flowers. So now I'm thinking back to the beginning, like, did the witch steal baby flower children, like the embryos of the flower children, and she just keeps them in a little sack to give away to people?
You know what? It is entirely possible. Maybe she's not such a good witch.
And also, she told the mother that this little girl was going to grow into a princess. So did she go and specifically steal the child of the king and queen and just take the baby to give away to someone? And they said she was a good witch. So I think that was a lie, because she's apparently knowingly kidnapping child seeds.
Maybe when they said good witch, they mean like she's good at being a witch, not necessarily like a good, like as an ethics or morals witch.
That
Be like,
I,
that
I
witch,
will buy
she's
that. That's the
good at
perfect
what she does.
explanation. That makes more sense than the movie. But yeah, she sees this girl in a flower, and she introduces herself and says that she was also born in a flower. And at this point, I didn't realize that this was a race of people who were born out of flowers, and I don't know how she knew that. But I thought, like, did she see this girl come out of this flower and assume that she was literally just born this second? She's like, oh, a girl who was born just like me. I'm like you. And no, I guess they live in the flowers they're born with. I don't know, because they go in and out of these flowers. But this whole race of people is born out of flowers. Okay.
Yeah,
that I guess I'm willing to suspend some disbelief with, because in fairy tale logic that makes sense. A lot of this other stuff didn't make sense even in fairy tale logic.
Oh, very much so. But even so, like, they keep like hiding in flowers. Do they never leave their flowers?
I don't know. But she did leave the flower to take her to see, I guess, either the prince or the king. And she says, Your Majesty, this girl says she was also born in a flower. And he says, You're finally here. Our history books said the rightful queen of the flower children would someday return. And her name would be Thumbelina, and she would be my wife. Like, these are very detailed history books. And Thumbelina says one of the lines that makes the most sense. Your history books said all that?
Again, a moment where it's not meant to be funny, probably, but damn, is it still funny in its own right?
Yeah. So this guy, he asks her if he'll marry her, and finally she has some logic. She says, "I don't know you. Can I just live here a while first?"
But even that prince or king or whatever, he's like, I want to, like, he sees her and he wants to marry her. It's like, give her, like you said, give her a little time, let her explore. She's been on a table, on a lily pad, and in a hole for the past year of her, like her entire life.
Yeah, really.
Give
I guess for him,
minutes.
he has the most excuse out of all of them, because he read this was going to happen in his history book. So he has a little bit of an excuse. The rest of them don't.
I suppose. Yeah, the rest, at least I finally got the right species. I'm just happy about that.
But he does say, "Forgive me, I've just waited so long. I'll ask again later."
5 minutes later, he comes back. Hey, you want to get married?
Well, less than 5 minutes, they are married. So
yeah.
I'm sure there was some time skipping happening. But
I would imagine so. At least she changed her outfit. She finally got to change her clothes.
Yes. And they sang an awkward song while standing in the flowers during the marriage.
Yeah. And those flowers, they were kind of like not quite stable. Like, I imagine trying to stand in those things was probably like, okay, stand here and stand there. Do not stand anywhere else. Otherwise, this whole rig will collapse.
I wouldn't be surprised. But the narrator also says that Mr. Bird watched the wedding. He was not there. He must have been off screen. And then that's where they say that he went back to tell them what happened. And then it says, Thumbelina lived happily ever after. And so did I. Mr. Digger wanted a wife, so he married me. Which is the weirdest way to put that.
Oh, 100%. And what happened to the poor mom? She had her daughter for like, all of 2 days. And then, she was taken away.
Yeah, she forgot about her.
Oh, yeah, totally. Because you'd forget about, the size of a walnut child.
Well, there was a scene like midway through the movie where it showed her sadly looking out the window and maybe crying. And it's like, that's
Oh,
the last you see of her.
that's so sad.
Yeah, really. They needed to have her go and find her.
They should have, yeah. Or at least should, they wasted so much time with everything else. What would have been like a, 1 10-second scene of even if it was the rear projection thing of Thumbelina showing up at her mom's place.
That would have made sense.
But that doesn't say much about this movie if we're being honest.
No. And that's the end of the Thumbelina story, but not the
Yes.
end of that section, because then it's another long scene of this girl who is looking through the diorama. She goes outside and goes back to the park, and then the song about Thumbelina is playing over park footage, and there's a lot of park footage here.
Oh, there's so much park footage. Although I will say the horse race thing, that looked like it would be kind of fun. Like Death Trap, but still a lot of fun.
Maybe, I don't know. We'll never know.
Yeah.
Disneyland killed it. Or this movie
R.I.P.
killed it.
Pirates World. R.I.P.
But then this girl finds a guy, I don't know who he was supposed to be, and they hold hands and walk away together. And then it says "the end" across the screen. And then it says, "Another fine picture from Pirates World. Come visit us in Dania, Florida."
Yes, you gotta love multiple sets of credits on a movie that's an hour and a half long and could be cut down to half an hour
And
without
doesn't
breaking a
even have
sweat.
its own credits.
No, no. Well, they were kind of at the beginning. Like you had like the at
A
least
little
the
bit,
people.
yeah.
Yeah.
But not like a full credits, I don't think. Like
No.
unless they made this on an extremely small, I mean it wasn't extremely small budget, but like cameramen and everybody else, all the extras, I don't think they got credits.
I don't think so. Well, like they had the kids were from some theater
Yeah.
company, and then they had the guy that played Santa, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, that there was not, it couldn't have been a full credits for the
No.
Santa section.
No, not
Or
at
the
all.
Jack section, because the Jack and the Beanstalk didn't open with credits and it didn't end with credits, which made it even weirder when, because I watched Jack and the Beanstalk first. I watched that version all the way through
Mm.
before I watched the Thumbelina. So it was even weirder when I'm watching and then it just stops to have these credits for this other movie. And then it has that whole intro thing. And then it has the Thumbelina story. It made the whole experience so much stranger than watching, like the movie's a strange experience no matter what. But it made it so much more strange watching the Thumbelina version
Oh
than the
yeah.
Jack of the Beanstalk one.
There's no doubt about that. That is everything about it, the way it was structured, the stories themselves, the way it was shot, everything is just weird.
Yeah. So bizarre. Thank you to Nicki for joining me for this episode, and if you want more from her, I'll have her links in the description below, and make sure to come back later this week for part 2. Hopefully we'll finally find out what the heck is an ice cream bunny, because it sure wasn't in the first part. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Christmas in July on iHeart Movies.
A mouse would be as big as me, a crow my birthday cake. If I were Thumbelina, this world would be so new. I'd sleep inside a flower and bathe in